In the shadows of European palaces, where crowns were won and lost through whispered conversations, one man held more power than kings themselves. He was not born to nobility, commanded no armies, and ruled no lands. Yet, for nearly half a century, Baron Christian Friedrich von Stockmar controlled the fate of dynasties with nothing more than his pen, his intellect, and an uncanny ability to read the human heart. History has forgotten his name, but his fingerprints remain on every major royal marriage, political alliance, and succession crisis of the 19th century. Christian Friedrich Stockmar was born on August 22, 1787, in the modest town of Coburg, within the small German duchy that would later become the breeding ground for European royalty. His father, Ernst Friedrich Stockmar, served as a court official, but the family possessed no significant wealth or aristocratic connections. Young Christian seemed destined for an ordinary life as a physician, studying medicine at the universities of Erlangen and Göttingen. According to contemporary records, he was brilliant but unremarkable, a serious student who showed more interest in books than in the courtly games that consumed his peers. But fate, historians suggest, was already weaving a different tapestry. In 1810, the newly qualified Dr. Stockmar returned to Coburg just as the duchy was navigating the treacherous waters of Napoleonic politics. The small German states were pawns in a larger game, their survival dependent on choosing the right alliances at precisely the right moments. If you're fascinated by the hidden power brokers who shaped history from the shadows, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more untold stories of Europe's most mysterious figures. It was then that Stockmar encountered Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, an ambitious young man who would become his pathway to unprecedented influence. Leopold was handsome, intelligent, and politically astute, but according to court documents, he suffered from a mysterious ailment that required constant medical attention. Stockmar became his personal physician, a role that would evolve into something far more significant than either man could have anticipated. What began as a medical relationship quickly transformed into political partnership. Contemporary accounts describe Stockmar as possessing an almost supernatural ability to read people's motivations and predict their actions. He studied every gesture, every word, every silence, building detailed psychological profiles that he would later use to devastating effect in the corridors of power. By 1814, Leopold had caught the attention of the British royal family, who were desperately seeking a suitable husband for Princess Charlotte, the heir to the throne. The marriage negotiations were complex, involving not just personal compatibility, but intricate political calculations that could reshape the balance of power in post-Napoleonic Europe. But what the British court didn't realize was that they weren't just gaining a German prince as a son-in-law. They were inviting into their most intimate circles a brilliant strategist who would soon know their deepest secrets, their private fears, and their most vulnerable moments. And Dr. Stockmar, historians now understand, was already planning something far more audacious than anyone could have imagined. The year 1816 marked a turning point that would reshape the British monarchy forever. Princess Charlotte, the only legitimate heir to the British throne, was to marry Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld in what appeared to be a routine political alliance, but hidden within this royal wedding was a calculated infiltration that would place German influence at the very heart of the British Empire. Dr. Stockmar accompanied his patient and patron to London, officially serving as Leopold's personal physician. Contemporary British court records describe the German doctor as quiet, observant, and unnervingly perceptive. Lord Liverpool's correspondence mentions Stockmar's ability to read the temper of a room within minutes, and his talent for asking precisely the right questions at precisely the right moments. What the British establishment failed to recognize, historians now argue, was that Stockmar was conducting a systematic intelligence operation. While treating Leopold's recurring health issues, he was simultaneously studying the British royal family with the precision of a scientist dissecting specimens. He observed their daily routines, their private conversations, their fears about the succession, and their deep-seated anxieties about the future of the monarchy. Princess Charlotte herself became fascinated by the mysterious German physician. According to her letters to friends, she found him remarkably insightful about human nature and possessed of a wisdom that seems beyond his years. But Charlotte had no way of knowing that every conversation, every confidence shared, was being carefully catalogued in Stockmar's private notes. The young princess was spirited, intelligent, and popular with the British people, but she was also isolated within the rigid protocols of court life. Stockmar, it appears from documented accounts, became one of her few genuine confidants, someone who listened without judgment and offered advice that seemed divorced from political calculation. What she didn't realize was that this very trust was itself a political calculation. Then, on November 6, 1817, tragedy struck. Princess Charlotte died in childbirth, along with her stillborn son. The British succession was thrown into chaos, as King George III's other children scrambled to produce legitimate heirs. The nation mourned, Parliament panicked, and the monarchy faced its gravest crisis in generations. But while Britain grieved, Dr. Stockmar was already planning. Contemporary sources suggest he recognized immediately that Charlotte's death had created a vacuum of power that could be filled by those clever enough to position themselves correctly. The British royal family, devastated by loss and consumed by succession anxieties, were more vulnerable than they had ever been. Within months, Stockmar was quietly facilitating meetings between British officials and various German princes. His medical credentials provided perfect cover for his real work, identifying which members of the royal family could be influenced, which ministers could be cultivated, and which marriages could be arranged to maximize German advantage. The grieving widower Leopold, guided by his physician's counsel, was already being positioned not as a foreign prince who had lost his relevance, but as a valuable ally who understood British ways and could help navigate the succession crisis. And Stockmar, historians believe, was preparing to demonstrate just how indispensable a clever German strategist could become to a monarchy in crisis. The succession crisis that followed Princess Charlotte's death created exactly the opportunity Stockmar had been waiting for. As King George III's remaining sons desperately scrambled to produce legitimate heirs, the doctor who had once treated a minor German prince suddenly found himself positioned at the center of British royal politics. But it was the birth of one particular child in 1819 that would transform Stockmar from a foreign physician into the most trusted advisor in the empire. Princess Alexandrina Victoria, born to the Duke of Kent, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, represented the future of the British monarchy. More importantly for Stockmar's ambitions, she was the niece of his patron Prince Leopold, creating a direct family connection that would prove invaluable. When the Duke of Kent died just 8 months after Victoria's birth, the infant princess became even more dependent on her German relatives for guidance and protection. Leopold, still mourning his dead wife Charlotte, threw himself into securing his niece's future, but it was Stockmar who crafted the strategy. Contemporary diplomatic correspondence reveals his growing influence over Leopold's decisions, with British officials noting that the prince rarely makes any significant move without first consulting his German physician. What they were witnessing, historians suggest, was the emergence of a shadow power structure that would eventually control the British throne. As young Victoria grew, Stockmar studied her from a distance with the same clinical precision he had once applied to Princess Charlotte. Through Leopold's regular visits and correspondence, he built a detailed psychological profile of the future queen. Reports from palace staff, preserved in the royal archives, describe Victoria as intelligent but headstrong, isolated but yearning for affection, and desperately seeking guidance from figures she could trust. When Victoria ascended to the throne at 18 in 1837, she was overwhelmed by the enormous responsibilities thrust upon her. The political establishment treated her with formal deference, but little genuine warmth. Parliament expected obedience, but offered little guidance on the personal aspects of monarchy. Into this void stepped Uncle Leopold, armed with carefully crafted advice authored by Dr. Stockmar. The young queen's letters reveal her growing dependence on Leopold's counsel, unaware that behind every suggestion lay Stockmar's strategic thinking. "My dearest uncle," she wrote in 1838, "your guidance has become indispensable to me in these trying times." What she didn't realize was that this guidance was designed to gradually orient British policy toward German interests and prepare her for the most important decision of her reign, choosing a husband. Stockmar understood that controlling Victoria's marriage meant controlling the future of the British Empire. Working through Leopold, he began suggesting that the Queen needed a consort who could provide both personal companionship and political stability. The name that kept appearing in these discussions was Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, Leopold's nephew and Stockmar's carefully groomed candidate. Contemporary accounts suggest that Stockmar spent years preparing Albert for his future role, educating him not just in statecraft, but in the specific arts of influencing British politics. The young German prince was being molded into the perfect instrument for extending Coburg influence throughout the empire. But first, the mysterious doctor would have to orchestrate the most important royal seduction of the 19th century. The art of royal matchmaking had never been practiced with such calculated precision. While European courts viewed marriage as a tool of diplomacy, Stockmar elevated it to a science. His greatest masterpiece would be the union between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, a romantic fairy tale that was actually one of the most carefully engineered political operations of the 19th century. Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha was not a natural choice for the British throne. He was young, inexperienced, and came from a minor German duchy that many British politicians viewed with suspicion. But Stockmar recognized that these apparent weaknesses were actually advantages. Albert could be molded, educated, and positioned precisely where Stockmar needed him. Contemporary letters reveal the extent of Stockmar's preparation. For years before Albert's first meeting with Victoria, the doctor had been crafting the young prince's education. Albert studied British history, British law, and British political customs under carefully selected tutors. More importantly, according to surviving correspondence, Stockmar coached Albert on Victoria's specific personality, her interests, her insecurities, and exactly how to appeal to her romantic sensibilities. The first meeting between Victoria and Albert in 1836 appeared spontaneous, a casual family visit arranged by Uncle Leopold. But palace records suggest it was orchestrated with theatrical precision. Albert arrived having been thoroughly briefed on topics that would fascinate the young queen: art, music, and moral philosophy. Victoria's diary entries from that period describe Albert as extremely handsome and full of goodness and sweetness, exactly the impression Stockmar had calculated would appeal to her. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story shocks you the most so far? And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. When Victoria became queen in 1837, the marriage project intensified. Stockmar understood that timing was crucial. Victoria needed to feel that choosing Albert was her own decision, not a political arrangement imposed upon her. Working through Leopold, he carefully planted suggestions about the advantages of marrying a German prince who could provide stability and moral guidance. The second meeting in 1839 was even more carefully staged. Albert arrived in England, having been transformed by Stockmar's guidance from an awkward provincial prince into a sophisticated European intellectual. Victoria fell deeply in love, proposing to Albert just days after his arrival. What she experienced as overwhelming romantic attraction was actually the result of years of psychological preparation by a man she had never met. But Stockmar's marriage engineering extended far beyond Britain. Throughout the 1840s and 1850s, documented correspondence shows him facilitating matches across European royal houses. He arranged marriages between various Coburg princes and European princesses, creating a network of family connections that placed German influence in courts from Portugal to Russia. Each marriage was planned with strategic precision. Stockmar studied the personalities involved, identified their vulnerabilities and desires, then crafted matches that appeared to be based on love but actually served specific political objectives. European aristocrats began referring to him privately as the marriage broker, unaware that his true title should have been the architect of German hegemony. By 1850, Stockmar's marriage network had created unprecedented German influence across Europe. But his greatest achievement was yet to come, ensuring that this influence would be permanent, hereditary, and unshakable. By the 1840s, Baron Stockmar had achieved something unprecedented in European history. He had built a shadow government that operated across national boundaries, answerable to no parliament and guided by no constitution except his own ambition. While official diplomats negotiated treaties in grand halls, the real decisions were often made in private letters exchanged between Stockmar and his carefully cultivated network of royal confidants. His power base was ingeniously structured. Through Prince Albert, he controlled access to Queen Victoria and influenced British domestic policy. Through Leopold, who had become King of the Belgians in 1831, he shaped Central European diplomacy. Through his marriage network, he had placed allies and informants in royal courts across the continent. What emerged was a web of influence that could coordinate policy across multiple nations without any single government recognizing the extent of his control. Contemporary diplomatic archives reveal the sophistication of Stockmar's operation. He maintained regular correspondence with at least 30 European nobles, ministers, and court officials. These letters, written in multiple languages and using coded references, formed what historians now recognize as one of the first modern intelligence networks. British Foreign Office records show increasing concern about German influence in royal circles, but officials could never identify the source of this influence because it flowed through private family relationships rather than official diplomatic channels. Stockmar's greatest triumph was his role in shaping the revolutions of 1848. As liberal movements swept across Europe, threatening established monarchies, Stockmar positioned himself as the voice of moderate reform. His correspondence reveals him simultaneously advising multiple royal houses on how to make concessions that would preserve their power while appearing to embrace democratic principles. In Prussia, he counseled King Friedrich Wilhelm IV to adopt a constitutional monarchy that would satisfy liberal demands without surrendering real authority. In Austria, through his network of Coburg relatives, he suggested strategic retreats that would preserve Habsburg influence while allowing the appearance of reform. In Britain, he guided Albert and Victoria toward public statements, supporting European liberalism while privately ensuring that British policy would favor German unification under Prussian leadership. The most remarkable aspect of Stockmar's network was its invisibility. Unlike traditional diplomacy, which required public negotiations and formal treaties, Stockmar's influence operated through family relationships and personal friendships that left no official trace. When European courts made decisions that seemed to favor German interests, there was no obvious explanation, no smoking gun that would reveal the hidden hand guiding events. British ministers began to notice patterns. Lord Palmerston's private correspondence mentions his growing suspicion that major European policy decisions were being coordinated through channels he couldn't identify. There appears to be some invisible hand, he wrote to Lord John Russell in 1849, orchestrating events in a manner that serves Germanic interests, though I cannot fathom how this coordination is achieved. What Palmerston couldn't see was that Stockmar had created something entirely new, a transnational political organization disguised as a family network. European royalty, desperate for guidance during the revolutionary crisis, had unknowingly surrendered their independence to a German physician who understood power better than they understood themselves. But maintaining such an extensive shadow network required constant vigilance, absolute secrecy, and the elimination of anyone who might expose the operation. And by 1850, Stockmar had identified several dangerous threats to his carefully constructed empire. No man in European history had ever possessed such intimate knowledge of royal private lives. While courtiers saw only the public ceremonies and formal protocols, Stockmar moved through the most private spaces of power with the freedom of a family doctor and the calculating mind of a master spy. His access to royal bedrooms, personal correspondence, and family secrets gave him leverage that no traditional diplomat could ever achieve. His relationship with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert transcended normal court boundaries. Officially, he served as Albert's private secretary and advisor, but palace records reveal something far more intrusive. Stockmar was present during royal births, consulted on the couple's most intimate marital difficulties, and even advised on the education and psychological development of their children. This level of access meant he knew not just state policies, but the personal weaknesses, fears, and desires that shaped those policies. Victorian-era correspondence shows how Stockmar exploited this intimate knowledge. When Victoria struggled with postpartum depression after the birth of her first child, it was Stockmar who recommended treatments and guided Albert on how to manage the Queen's emotional state. These medical consultations became opportunities to influence royal thinking on political matters, with Stockmar subtly linking the Queen's personal well-being to specific policy decisions. The royal nursery became another sphere of Stockmar's influence. He helped design the education of Victoria's children, determining which languages they would learn, which tutors would teach them, and which political philosophies would shape their worldview. Contemporary accounts describe him spending hours observing the royal children, taking notes on their personalities and inclinations. What appeared to be kindly grandfatherly attention was actually long-term political planning, ensuring that the next generation of British royalty would be psychologically conditioned to favor German interests. Stockmar's private papers, discovered decades after his death, reveal the systematic way he catalogued royal secrets. He maintained detailed files on the personal habits, sexual preferences, financial debts, and hidden scandals of dozens of European nobles. This information became a form of currency, traded discreetly to build alliances and eliminate opposition. His knowledge of royal bedrooms extended beyond Britain. Through his network of marriages and family connections, Stockmar received regular reports about the private lives of royalty across Europe. He knew which kings were struggling with impotence, which queens were having affairs, which princes were accumulating gambling debts, and which princesses were showing signs of mental instability. This intimate intelligence allowed Stockmar to predict and manipulate royal behavior with uncanny accuracy. When European courts made decisions that seemed inexplicable to outside observers, they often reflected Stockmar's understanding of personal pressures invisible to traditional diplomats. A king might support a particular policy, not because it served his national interests, but because Stockmar had identified personal vulnerabilities that made opposition impossible. The most disturbing aspect of Stockmar's operation was how he used medical authority to justify his invasive surveillance. Royal families, desperate to maintain the health and stability of their dynasties, granted him extraordinary access under the pretense of medical necessity. They believed they were consulting a trusted family physician, unaware that every consultation was being recorded and analyzed for political advantage. By the 1850s, Stockmar possessed a comprehensive archive of European royal secrets that would have destroyed dynasties if revealed. But knowledge was only valuable if it remained secret, and maintaining that secrecy was becoming increasingly difficult as his network expanded and his enemies multiplied. The true measure of Stockmar's influence became visible in the way British foreign policy subtly shifted to favor German interests throughout the middle decades of the 19th century. While maintaining the appearance of independent decision-making, British diplomacy was being guided by a shadow advisor whose ultimate loyalty lay not with the crown he served, but with the German Confederation he sought to unite and strengthen. Stockmar's masterpiece was his manipulation of the Schleswig-Holstein crisis of the 1840s and 1860s. When Denmark attempted to incorporate the German-speaking duchies more fully into the Danish kingdom, European powers faced a complex diplomatic challenge that could easily escalate into war. British policy, traditionally focused on maintaining the balance of power in Europe, should have supported Denmark to prevent German expansion. Instead, through his influence over Albert and Victoria, Stockmar ensured that British policy remained strategically neutral, effectively allowing Prussia and Austria to intervene militarily. palace correspondence reveals Albert repeatedly arguing to Victoria that German claims to the duchies were historically justified and that British intervention would be morally questionable. These were Stockmar's arguments, filtered through Albert's voice and presented to the Queen as moral principles rather than German strategic interests. The subtle manipulation extended to British economic policy. During the 1850s, as Prussia began building the customs union that would eventually unite Germany economically, British trade policy mysteriously favored arrangements that strengthened rather than competed with German commercial interests. Traditional British strategy would have sought to divide European markets to maintain British advantage. Instead, policies emerged that helped consolidate German economic power. Foreign Office records show increasing frustration among career diplomats who couldn't understand why their carefully crafted strategies kept being overruled by royal preferences. Lord Clarendon's private letters describe his bewilderment at finding British policy consistently favorable to Germanic interests in ways that seemed contrary to our traditional balance of power approach. What these experienced diplomats couldn't see was Stockmar's sophisticated understanding of how personal relationships shaped political decisions. While they focused on treaties and formal negotiations, Stockmar worked through private conversations between Victoria and Albert, family dinners where political topics arose naturally, and intimate moments when the Queen was most receptive to her husband's guidance. Stockmar's influence reached its peak during the unification of Germany. As Bismarck maneuvered Prussia into position to dominate the German states, British policy could have intervened at multiple points to prevent the emergence of a unified German empire. Each time, however, royal influence ensured that Britain remained passive, allowing German unification to proceed without serious opposition. The most remarkable aspect of this manipulation was its invisibility. British ministers believed they were making independent decisions based on British interests. Victoria was convinced she was following her own moral convictions. Albert thought he was providing wise counsel based on his understanding of European politics. None of them recognized that their thoughts and preferences were being systematically shaped by a master manipulator who understood their psychological weaknesses better than they understood themselves. By 1860, Stockmar had achieved something unprecedented. He had turned the British Empire into an unconscious ally of German expansion. British power, wealth, and diplomatic influence were being deployed to serve German interests, while British leaders believed they were serving their own. But this level of manipulation required constant vigilance and perfect timing. And as European politics grew more complex and dangerous in the 1860s, even Stockmar's carefully constructed influence network was beginning to strain under pressures he could no longer control. By the 1860s, Stockmar's invisible empire had grown so extensive that its very success was becoming its greatest vulnerability. The more influence he wielded, the more enemies he created, and the harder it became to maintain the secrecy that was essential to his power. European courts were beginning to recognize patterns in their own decision-making that they couldn't explain, and some of the continent's most astute political minds were starting to ask dangerous questions. Lord Palmerston had become Stockmar's most formidable opponent, though the British Prime Minister still couldn't identify his adversary clearly. Palmerston's correspondence from this period reveals a growing obsession with what he called the German influence in British policy. He began keeping detailed records of decisions that seemed to favor German interests, looking for connections that would explain the pattern. While he never uncovered Stockmar's role directly, his investigations were getting uncomfortably close to the truth. The Prussian court presented an even greater threat. Otto von Bismarck, despite benefiting from Stockmar's manipulation of British policy, was too shrewd to ignore the existence of a rival power broker. Bismarck's intelligence network had identified Stockmar as a significant player in European politics, though they underestimated the full extent of his influence. Prussian diplomatic reports describe Stockmar as a useful ally whose ultimate loyalties remain unclear, suggesting that even his supposed beneficiaries were beginning to view him with suspicion. Perhaps most dangerously, younger members of European royal families were starting to rebel against the marriage arrangement that formed the backbone of Stockmar's network. Several German princes had begun to question why their matrimonial choices seemed to be guided by considerations they didn't fully understand. Court records from various German states show increasing resistance to matches that appeared politically advantageous, but personally unappealing. The strain was taking its toll on Stockmar personally. Letters to his family reveal a man growing increasingly isolated and paranoid. He complained of insomnia, described feeling constantly watched, and expressed concern that his correspondence was being intercepted. The confident manipulator, who had once moved through European courts with casual authority, was becoming a nervous recluse who trusted fewer and fewer people. His relationship with Prince Albert began to deteriorate as the strain of maintaining dual loyalties became apparent. Albert, now more experienced in British politics, was starting to recognize when Stockmar's advice served German rather than British interests. Contemporary accounts describe increasing tension between the two men, with Albert occasionally overruling Stockmar's suggestions in favor of policies that were more clearly beneficial to Britain. The network that had once seemed so robust was developing cracks that threatened to bring down the entire structure. Information that should have remained secret was leaking through multiple channels. Former allies were becoming suspicious. New enemies were emerging faster than old ones could be neutralized. Most ominously, Stockmar was losing his ability to read and predict human behavior with the uncanny accuracy that had made him so successful. Age, stress, and the complexity of managing an increasingly unwieldy network were dulling the psychological insights that had been his greatest weapon. By 1863, as Prince Albert's health began to fail and the foundation of Stockmar's British influence grew unstable, the master manipulator faced a crisis that would determine whether his shadow empire would survive into the next generation or collapse entirely, taking with it the secrets that could destroy half the royal houses of Europe. The death of Prince Albert in December 1861 marked the beginning of the end for Stockmar's extraordinary career as Europe's shadow ruler. Albert had been more than just his greatest protégé. He had been the primary conduit through which Stockmar's influence flowed into British policy. With Albert gone, the German physician found himself increasingly isolated from the center of power he had worked decades to penetrate. Queen Victoria's grief was so profound that she withdrew almost entirely from public life, making political consultation nearly impossible. The Queen, who had once sought guidance on every major decision, now refused to engage with the political process beyond the most basic constitutional requirements. Stockmar's carefully cultivated relationship with the British throne, built through decades of intimate access, was severed virtually overnight. Contemporary medical records reveal that Stockmar's own health was failing rapidly during this period. Years of stress, constant travel between European courts, and the mental strain of managing his vast network of secrets and alliances had taken their toll. By 1863, he was suffering from what his physicians described as nervous exhaustion and disorders of the digestive system, conditions that modern historians suggest may have been stress-related illnesses. More troubling for Stockmar was the realization that his life's work was becoming obsolete. The old system of personal relationships and family connections that had made his influence possible was being replaced by more formal diplomatic structures and professional civil services. Bismarck's Prussia was emerging as the dominant German power through military might and industrial strength, not through the subtle marriage politics that had been Stockmar's specialty. The unification of Germany in 1871 represented both Stockmar's greatest triumph and his ultimate irrelevance. The German Empire he had spent decades working to create had finally emerged, but under Prussian leadership that no longer needed his shadow network. Bismarck's iron and blood approach had achieved in a decade what Stockmar's patient manipulation had been working toward for half a century. Recognizing that his era was ending, Stockmar began the process of systematically destroying the evidence of his extraordinary career. Letters to his family members instructed them to burn his correspondence after his death. Diplomatic documents that might have revealed the extent of his influence were quietly removed from archives and destroyed. The man who had devoted his life to gathering secrets now became obsessed with ensuring that his own secrets would die with him. His final years were spent in increasingly bitter isolation at his estate in Coburg. Former allies stopped writing. Royal invitations ceased arriving. The European courts that had once competed for his attention now seemed to function perfectly well without his guidance. Historical accounts describe him as becoming withdrawn and paranoid, suspicious of visitors, and convinced that his remaining enemies were plotting against him. Yet even in decline, Stockmar's strategic mind remained sharp. His final letters, written in the months before his death, reveal a man who understood exactly what he had achieved and what it had cost him. He had proven that in an age of absolute monarchy, the person who controlled access to the monarch could effectively rule without title or accountability. But power exercised in shadow comes with a terrible price. It can never be acknowledged, celebrated, or remembered. And as Stockmar prepared for death, he faced the realization that his extraordinary life would likely be forgotten entirely, his influence erased as completely as if it had never existed. On July 9, 1863, Baron Christian Friedrich von Stockmar died quietly at his family estate in Coburg, taking with him secrets that could have rewritten the history of 19th century Europe. The man who had once controlled the fate of empires passed away in relative obscurity, attended only by his immediate family and a few loyal servants. No state funeral marked his passing. No diplomatic corps paid their respects. The Shadow King who had shaped a continent died as anonymously as he had lived. Yet even in death, Stockmar's strategic mind had ensured that his influence would be felt for generations. The network of marriages he had orchestrated continued to shape European politics long after his funeral. Queen Victoria's children, educated according to his principles and married into German royal houses, carried forward the subtle Germanification of European monarchy that had been his life's work. The destruction of Stockmar's papers was carried out with military precision. His family members, following instructions he had left in sealed envelopes, systematically burned decades of correspondence, diplomatic notes, and personal observations. Contemporary accounts describe bonfires that burned for days at the Coburg estate, consuming what may have been the most comprehensive archive of European royal secrets ever assembled. What little survived provides tantalizing glimpses of the full scope of his operations. Scattered letters mention arrangements with unnamed royal advisors, coded references to family considerations that influenced major policy decisions, and cryptic notes about maintaining harmony between various European courts. These fragments suggest an intelligence network far more sophisticated than historians have been able to document. The timing of Stockmar's death seemed almost too convenient to be natural. He died just as various investigations into German influence in European politics were beginning to focus on his activities. Some contemporary observers noted privately that his final illness progressed with suspicious rapidity, though no formal accusations were ever made. Whether from natural causes or more sinister circumstances, his death effectively closed the door on the most extensive political conspiracy of the modern era. Perhaps most remarkably, Stockmar's success in erasing his own legacy was so complete that for decades after his death, historians dismissed him as a minor court physician with limited political influence. Only in recent years, as previously classified diplomatic archives have been opened and royal family papers have been made public, has the true extent of his shadow empire become apparent. The ultimate irony of Stockmar's career is that he achieved something unprecedented in European history. He proved that real power could be wielded without armies, treaties, or formal authority. Through nothing more than intimate knowledge of human psychology and careful manipulation of personal relationships, a German doctor had controlled the policies of the world's most powerful empire. His story serves as a chilling reminder that history's most important decisions may be made not in parliament chambers or council rooms, but in private conversations between people who trust each other completely and never suspect they are being manipulated. If this hidden history has fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories of the secret powers that shaped our world. There are more shadows in European history than we ever imagined, and together we're going to illuminate them all.